Yes, thank you for being here. And I will talk to you a little about compliance monitoring and some other stuff about measurements. First, an acknowledgement. We have been quite active in some different campaigns in the Baltic Sea, Poland, Russia, and some fixed sites. So this is some of the collaborators that I would like to thank. Okay, so our part in the EnviSuM project is the bottom here. It's the bottom here. So it's, we are on the emission side, on emission measurements here. And our role is really to make sure that the emission modelers like Jukka-Pekka, like Christine, that they are producing relevant results. So that's like the main objective. So we have measured ship emissions, and we do it per fuel unit of SO2 and NOx and also particles. And we have tried to do this in different modes of operation. We have, and then we do have this emission model validation. And the third thing is the actual compliance measurements of the sulfur primarily. But also, I will talk about NOx, which will be relevant now from 2021. How it can be done or how it cannot be done. Okay, so this is the second area, and we know that from 2015, then we know that it's the 0.1% limit that was switched in 2014, and of course now the problem is do the shipping industry follow this 0.1%? How many follow it? Because there's a big price difference, of course, between heavy and the heavy fuel oil and the cleaner oil. So also the shipping industry is very interested. If we have this legislation, it has to be an equal playing field. So it doesn't have to do with the environment, but it's important that the rules are the same for everyone. So there's no one is making profit from using the bad fuel. So we have been active in basically in these three different areas here. We've been in St. Petersburg, we have been in Gdansk, Virginia, and in Göteborg. This is the rings. This is the three core cities of the EnviSuM project. We have also done airborne measurements on the Baltic Sea, approximately in that circle that you see here, around the island of Gotland, to see what are the ships, what's happening out here. In addition to this, we are active in other type of monitoring. So we have a site at the Great Belt Bridge that we operate on behalf of the Danish EPA. We also have another site at the Öresund Bridge, which we operate on behalf of the Swedish Transport Agency. It's actually now on Pepparholmen, which is actually in Danish territory also. So basically, the activities that we have done. Here is Göteborg. This is the site in Göteborg. This is where we do some monitoring, and there's been a visit there during the EnviSuM project when we had a meeting in Göteborg. We also do we have done some additional measurement at the Great Belt Bridge, where we have complemented the sulfur compliance measurement by the EPA by also some particle measurements. And then we had these two mob campaigns that we did in 2017 and 2018 in the fall. So in Poland, and it's in St. Petersburg. So we rented some ships, put equipment, and we were measuring as much as we could in the harbor and around. And last of all, we have this airplane that is equipped with sensors, so we can actually fly through the smoke and analyze what's happening out in the open sea. In addition to this, we actually have a associated project by the Swedish Institute where we have some Russian colleagues doing modeling on the St. Petersburg area to complement what's being done in St. Petersburg. So this shows you the ship emission data from steam actually between 14 and 16, which is the input to this modeling. So that's something that will come out in parallel to the EnviSuM report. Okay. You saw in this movie that Sari showed, this is an extract from this movie, how you can actually monitor the ship smoke when they pass bridges. So this is a sniffer. So basically it's just an air intake, and you have an instrument inside the bridge that is actually analyzing the smoke. This is how the air intake looks like when we were in Russia, for instance, driving around. So the smoke from this ship, it comes into here, and then it's going into the one part here. This is the gas phase, and another one there is the aerosol phase, particular matter. The measurements are done. So this is bridge measurements. This is the Great Belt Bridge. So we actually have some software where we analyze the CO2 and SO2 NOx and also some other stuff. So, and we measure the ratio of SO2 and CO2 to see what's the sulfur to coal ratio in the smoke. And from this, you can actually derive what's the fuel content used by the ships. And the system is even automatic. So it sends after 2 minutes, it sends to a database what's kind of sulfur is inside here, what's used by this ship, and so on. Also, how much NOx is being used. Measurements can also be done from aircraft, so then you have to fly in the smoke. Most of the time it doesn't look like this. Actually, the smoke is very low, so it's at 60 meters, unfortunately. Since the ships, they have AIS and everything, it's very easy to get information about what they are doing, where they are going, and loads, and cargo, what kind of ship it is, basically. And the ratio between sulfur and CO2 tells us what's the fuel sulfur content. So by just flying through the smoke, you get an answer very quickly. You can also add other type of species. So this shows you similar measurements, but it shows also particulate phase, black carbon, and some particulate matter in addition. And by doing this ratioing against CO2, we can get what's the emission factors. How much emission do you have per fuel unit of NOx, PM, particulate number, and black carbon in general. The instrumentation we are using is kind of a state-of-the-art equipment for in air quality monitoring. You might say that we rebuild a little. So for the gas, we have gas phase, we have particulate phase, and we also use some optical measurements, which I won't talk too much about that. So they're pretty big. So you need to have like an aircraft, you need to put it in the bridge. You cannot put it in a drone, for instance, and so on, like we saw in the beginning. We also have some much smaller equipment which weighs 1 to 2 kilos, but that's poorer quality sensors, and you have to fly closer to the plume and so on that we're playing around with. And there's also some more advanced sensors that you can also use to get some better precision. And I should say that this type of measurements, it has been derived in another EU project called COMPMON. And right now there's other groups in Europe. We have a Belgian colleague here who's flying on the North Sea with an aircraft all the time, operationally, from the Belgian. And we also have measurements in Germany. They have 5 stations, I think, and there's been some activities in Finland and so on. So this builds upon those experiences. There's also activities here in Denmark where they fly the smaller sensors on helicopters and so on. So there's some activities on this side. Okay, so some results. This here is the airborne results from the Baltic Sea campaign. And it's plotted in a way here, so you have the fuel sulfur content derived from the SO2 to CO2 ratio. And you have in red ships that are above 0.3% sulfur fuel, and in green you have ships that are above below 0.15, and in yellow between. So yellow and red is basically non-compliant ship, and the red is a gross non-compliant ship. So the statistics here tells us that 6% of the ships were above here 0.15%, and 2% of the ships here were in gross non-compliance. They were running really high sulfur oil with fuel content. I think I'm sort of proud of this measurement because if the shipping industry, if they want to cheat or something, this is where they should do it. You know, no one can control them, and this is in the middle, and it's a long way before you go into land or so on. So I think this is a really good place to check what's the temperature, what's happening out there. Among those 2% ships or 6% ships, this number actually we find quite often now, that it looks like that a couple of percent are really gross non-compliers, and then there's a couple of percent that are somewhere in between. We find sometimes the same type of shipping company that there's some shipping companies that seems to be more prominent to be non-compliant than others, etc. But I mean, most of them obviously are following because it's I mean, pretty okay. Similar measurements here done in St. Petersburg. Here we did shipborne measurements, and this is the ship lane St. Petersburg here. Well, you can see that the numbers look pretty much the same. We saw 3% of the ships were actually were gross non-compliers, and the difference if you compare to other places like in Poland. In Poland, we saw no ships that were actually above 0.15 in Gdansk, Gdynia, and in Göteborg we don't see them either. At the Great Belt, we see a little less than this, but there were some ships, again from the same companies actually, that were high here sometimes. Yeah. So this sort of summarizes measurements that we have done. Here in bold is the EnviSuM activities, that I have already told you about. So the measurements we did in the Tri-City show basically perfect compliance, while St. Petersburg and Baltic Sea were like similar, you might say. We can compare this to activities measurements that we did in this compound project, where we had 13% non-compliance close to the SECA border. But this was done in September 2016, so there's some differences in year here. We have also measurement at the Great Belt Bridge and at the Öresund Bridge showing non-compliance of between sort of similar numbers. But I should say that last year we have seen that we don't see too many non-compliant ships the last half year or so. We have seen virtually none, I think. It's a couple of ships that have scrubbers that is not working and so on. But and if I hear like what other people say that the port state, it looks also like it has been improving anyway. So I would say the situation is sort of I think it's under control. Okay, that was the sulfur. Switching over to NOx. NOx, this is the NOx legislation. So a little more complicated than the sulfur because it relates to what kind of engine you have. So what kind of rated engine speed you have. So a container vessel with one engine, it's like typically 100 RPM. It has to be somewhere here. So while like a ferry boat or something, a Ro-Ro ferry would probably be around 500. So, and the NOx also is given as gram emission of NO2 per actual power in kilowatt hour. So how much power they put out. So in order to do a measurement of this, we measure the gram per fuel, and then we have to know how fuel efficient are the ships. Typically they are like between 160 and 250 grams fuel per kilowatt hour of power or something. And we use typically, the numbers I have we have just put 200. We haven't made any assumptions. Here's the NOx measurements. Actually, one more comment is that the IMO regulation is a little more complicated. Is that it's more a chassis. It's more a test where you have to operate the engine at 4 different loads, 25, 50, 75, and 90, and you weight these loads differently. Most of the weight is at the 75% load. So, of course, when we do now a snapshot measurement, we can argue how is the variability now in the different loads, how does it correlate and so on. So that's sort of a measurement problem and you have to understand that. Here are NOx measurements done in Göteborg. It's given in gram per kilo. You can see that most of them are actually quite low. This is a maneuvering zone. So each of the ships has been measured, and this is a maneuvering zone. So the ships are not running full speed. They are running 8 knots on this side, and then they are running like 10, 15 on the left side of this island where the measurements are done. Here we have actually compared the whole data set of measurements with the steam model that you heard Jutta-Pekka talk about. It shows you the statistics. In the red is the median, and the blue here is the 25 and 75 percentile, and this is the 10 and 90 percentile. So you can see that there's a small 10 to 20% difference in the median, and we can see this, and the variability is much higher in the measurements than in the model. This is like sort of new data, and we will publish this. So we haven't analyzed this fully yet, but this is typically how our data is supposed to be used to see that whatever is produced by the modelings has some relevance. If we now go out to the Baltic Sea, you can see the same gram per kilo of fuel. Now it looks much more red. It's because the ships are running full speed, most of them, 75% load. So it's not so far away from this IMO load curve because it's weighted mostly there. Here is the comparison again with the steam model. Again, a little step, but it's not too bad. Higher variability in the measurements, but between the 25 and 75, it's kind of comparable. So I think it's a good result. On the other hand, the ship-to-ship correlation is not as good as it looks like here. So on average it's good, but if you look for a single ship, then the variability is much higher. So there's something we're looking into. Okay, so if we can convert the gram per kilo that I had here to kilowatt hour, and then we can even divide this into the tier, and there's a tier 1 and 2 that is applicable right now, limits for how much NOx the ships are allowed to release. And reds here is that ships that are 30% higher than what they should if they were following this tier limit. Again, the caveat is that this is a snapshot measurement, so we need to have an understanding what kind of errors this snapshot causes. But basically, 25-30% of ships were above these tier limits when we looked at this. So, is it possible to do compliance measurement of NOx in this way? We think it's possible, and especially the tier 3 would be a kind of dramatic change. But again, we have this thing that we have to look more deeper into the engine operation mode and how that affects different type of measurements, and we need a sensitivity analysis. Okay. Another result here is the Tri-City. Similar measurements of ships, and here we also measured ships at berth actually. So ships that were standing still, running auxiliary, and main engines. So you can see here two histograms here, probability density function as a function of gram per kilo. And you can see there's a big difference in the auxiliary compared to the main engines in efficiency according to our measurements. If we compare this to the FMI model again, we see that in operation for the main engines, the comparison is quite good, but there's quite a big difference in the auxiliary. It's something that we will have to look into why the difference is this big. We have also compared to the Stettin, the Marine University of Stettin, Thaddeus, who has another model where they have looked at, and this is the NOx they have produced for the same type of ships here. We can see that there's also again a little shift. The median value is a little higher here, and so on. Yeah. Okay. Finally, We have also looked into the PM emissions to some extent. This shows black carbon emission, particulate matter of black carbon from St. Petersburg and from Tri-City, from Gdansk, Gdynia. And here we have divided the data in grams per kilo for different types of vessels. And as you can see here, and the one thing that sticks out kind of strongly here is the service ships. And this is really river type of boats that they are providing service within, not so far away from St. Petersburg anyway, and they go on the rivers and so on. And we can see that they seem to stick out when it comes to black carbon, because of the engines and so on. And you can see that the median value is 2.3 compared to 0.78 for the same type of vessels in Tri-City, although it's much fewer there. And it's not the same type of boats, of ships, even though they are categorized in the same way. So this is a way, and we will look into this more deeply and compare to the modeling. This is a way to understand where things are consistent or not. We have also looked at how the BC emissions, how they vary as a function of speed of the ships, for instance, of maneuvering, and we see that there's a negative slope that which might be expected in the emissions of the BC. Yes, and here is the BC emissions from the ships at berth and in operation, and we see that we have much higher, but we have distinctly higher emissions in grams per kilo of BC from the ships at berth or Schiller engines. We need to look into this, we don't understand it, but this is just what comes out in the data so far. Okay, so to summarize, many of these things have been things that we will publish in a scientific paper, and we'll have to go through a little deeper. But the SO2 compliance rate is generally better than 95%, with the exception at the SECA border. Approximately 2 to 3% of the ships shows gross non-compliance. The compliance rate appears to have improved between 16 and 18. So right now we are in a good situation. We don't see too many high emitters. The NOx emission factors were sort of similar in the studied areas, where we had the highest values on the open sea and the lowest values for ship at berth. We had some comparison, and there was some systematic that there was a difference that the models showed a little higher median values emissions than we measured, and even worse for the for the ships at berth. The PM emissions were exceptionally high for service vessels. We had a negative correlation of emission factor and speed. And I didn't show this, but we actually see that a large fraction of the particles appears to be BC. And we are still trying to understand this. It's not what you would expect, but we have some other sensors where we try to sum things up. So this is something we're looking into. Okay, thank you.